Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. It's going to be a really jam-packed webinar. Thank you again for coming. I know this is one of the topics that I work on the most with some of my clients, and we do apologize. We've got a puppy in the office today, so we're working on sweet Remy getting him situated. But anyways, we will get started as is the chaos of life happening around us. I would suggest that you have a pen and paper. If you want to just type notes into your phone or on your laptop, that's okay too, but pen and paper would be just nice to jot down some ideas or things that speak to you that will be the most useful, because what you'll find today is I'm going to give you a lot of different tools and techniques, but I want you to just focus on what resonates for you, focus on what works for you. This will be recorded, so if you want to watch it again at a different time in your life, where you might pick up on a different tool that works better, that's great too. So we'll go ahead and get started. And what I first want to talk about is just to normalize the experience of having symptoms flare up when things around you become a bit more chaotic. And the goal of this nervous system retraining work is not to make it so that you never react ever again. It's to make it so that your nervous system is more flexible and adaptable. And that takes time, it takes practice, but it is absolutely possible. And you will become more aware of your own triggers and different experiences and how your nervous system reacts in the face of stress or chaotic things happening in life, uncertainty. And that's why I call it life happens, right? Because it's not about being perfect all the time and ignoring and not having any experiences throw you off, because that's just the nature of life. But when you throw in chronic pain or other chronic symptoms on top of that, it can be more, throw you off even more. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, is how to stay grounded in those times of uncertainty and those times when life throws you for a curveball, or as my lovely mother likes to say, life is like a cha-cha. It's one step forward, two steps back, and sometimes life throws in a spin. And it's during those two steps back or that spin that we really do want to make sure that you feel supported and feel really good about the work that you're doing, and that it isn't pushing you back to where you started. Rather, it's just giving you a new perspective or showing you something new. And so to start this, we're just going to do a simple grounding practice together. It's one you may have done before. It's going to be kind of a shorter version, but I'd like you to do is uncross your legs and sit in your chair or stand, or if you're laying on the floor, like I like to do when I'm listening to these things, just bend your knees and put your feet on the ground, flat on the ground. And I want you to take one hand on your heart and one hand, your other hand, either on your belly or on your thigh, whatever feels good. And we're just going to take a nice deep breath in and sigh it out. And then I want you to keep breathing deeply, but focus now on wiggling your toes. And I like to close my eyes for this. You can close your eyes too, if that feels good, or keep them open if it helps you stay more present. You can open your eyes and look around too. Just wiggling the toes, feeling the tips of the toes, the balls of the feet, and then the heels, even maybe the outer edges of the feet, and just tuning in to what does it feel like to be here, present with me, listening to my voice, and breathing in this body. And I want to honor the fact that sometimes when we tune in and we become grounded and present, it can feel very uncomfortable if years in the past or moments in the past we were not able to stay present in the body because of so much discomfort. And so by staying grounded and practicing being more grounded, being more present in the body, it eventually becomes a soothing thing to do. I know when I was healing from chronic pain, it was extremely difficult for me to stay present or notice sensations in my body. And so by doing that in little small pieces like we just did, by wiggling the toes, it can really make a big difference. And so, one of the first tools you can use in these times that you're noticing that things are chaotic around you is that sense of presence. And so, that's where that lovely exercise that you've probably heard before, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of all the different senses, can be very, very helpful. And so, what you want to do is look around in space and notice 5 things you can see and describe them in as much detail as possible. And then it's 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And those are really great present moment grounding exercise for when, especially if you're feeling a bit spun out or if anxiety starts to happen. And so, what I also want to talk about today is that flexibility and adaptability of the nervous system that you'll get over time from doing the tools and techniques that you're practicing at Lynn. And so, like I said before, this does take time and it's a muscle. It's like if you go into the gym and you start working out, maybe the first day it's 1 pound, and maybe the 20th day it's still 1 pound. But eventually, as you keep training, you will become stronger and more adaptable, maybe even more flexible as well. Same thing with your nervous system. I know certain folks, myself included, can get very frustrated with the fact that it's a lot of repetition and it's a lot of practice, but over time, your nervous system and your brain will learn these ways of being are safe, and I can let down my guard and not go into high alert. And so that's one of the things that we want to look for, I guess, or aim towards as we train doing this work, is being more flexible and more adaptable. And so one of those things that you can do is like, in the past, how would I have handled this? Oh wow, in the past this thing probably would have shut me down and I maybe would have had a really big flare up, but instead I just noticed some smaller twinges, or it lasted for 3 days instead of 1 week. Just because it's happening doesn't mean that it's bad. It's looking for those changes and those different experiences over time. And so, one of the other things that I want to talk about too is focusing on when life is chaotic or when the uncertainty is happening. What are your needs? What do you need as a human being, as you, to feel your best? And this is where I would love for you to jot down while we're talking. What are some things that bring you joy, that bring you contentment, peace, calm, reassurance? These can be activities you do, people you meet with, movements that you do. For instance, I really love getting out into nature, and I know that nature can be very soothing and very grounding, as they say, as well. And so, some things that can be very useful for you. And I'd like for you to make a list so that you have it on hand for those times when you do feel uncertainty is coming about. What do I need? What makes me feel the most me, the most centered, the best that I can feel in this moment? It's not about feeling perfect. It's not about not reacting. And it's not about not being upset, because as humans living this human experience, life is going to go all different sorts of ways. And so it can be very helpful to have a list of tools or practices that you can go to when things start to feel a little rocky. And, you'll learn to surf those waves over time. It's not about not being thrown off at all and being stagnant. The trees that don't bend are not able to adapt. And there was this great premise of stress wind for trees. And this is another thing that can be very useful when uncertainty happens, is reframing that uncertainty to be something that is building you up, making you stronger, and helping you get where you want to go in life. And so this idea of stress wind is these trees that were grown, if there was no wind, no stress, the trees didn't flourish the way that other trees do. And they found that wind and different stressors can actually make the trees stronger over time. And I like to remind myself during those times of uncertainty, as well as remind my members and patients of that as well, is that these things are making you stronger. And having that simple reframe of, instead of thinking, why can't I do this? Why am I reacting this way? Why is my body sending another signal or having an old symptom? Oh, I'm so frustrated. Those thoughts that we can get spun into. Instead, it can be very helpful to think, okay, this is an opportunity. This is for me to practice. I'm learning something from this, even if I can't understand what it is right now. And this is making me stronger. Rather, I'm so weak. Why is this happening? And so, those are a couple of the more foundational concepts of this that I find to be very useful. The third one is having a team in place that you can go to, that you can talk to, that feels like they they support you. Doesn't have to necessarily be in the chronic pain recovery aspect, although our Lynn coaches are amazing at this, and I am always so honored to be on someone's team. But it can also be friends that you can reach out to and not talk about your stress with, but talk about other things and remind you of where you're at in life and that everything will work out or that it is okay. It's also great to have those friends you can cry to or talk with to help you feel a little bit more understood as well. And so having this team in place of who's a good person to talk to when I'm stressed about my body, who's a good person to talk to when I'm stressed about work or when I'm stressed about relationships, who is somebody that I can count on or help me laugh, right? It doesn't always have to be about staying in that chaoticness. It's where can I find relief, peace, empathy, kindness. And it could even be a book that you read during those times as well to have something that centers you. And so the people you reach out to can also be webinars you rewatch or podcasts you listen to again to remind you that you are safe and that life will happen and that you will be okay. And so I would encourage you to ask some questions in the chat. If you have any questions at this time, we're about halfway through. And so I'll keep going with some of the points that I want to talk about. But if you have anything that you want me to workshop, I know we had a couple of questions come in prior to this as well that we'll get to, but just wanted to let you know that those are always welcome as well. And so something else that I love to talk about is two things that have to do with more of our thinking than what we're feeling necessarily. And so what I want you to notice is if we just tune in to the body again, and I like to close my eyes and put my hand on my heart, but you find what works for you and you take a nice breath, feel centered, and just notice what's the texture of your mind. If we're tuning in to the mind and how that mind likes to flow or not flow, is it rigid? Is it solid? Is it tingly or kind of sparkling? You know, what does your mind like to do? Where is it at right now today? And it doesn't necessarily need to be the same every time you check in, but it's just a way to look at something through a lens of a texture rather than negative or positive or angry or anything else. It's just, okay, what's the texture of your mind today? Is it like sandpaper? Is it sticky? Is it slow, like honey dripping? You can find different ways of using metaphor and simile and different analogies to describe your mind in a way that can help you make a little bit more sense of things. And then another thing to do is also check in when you're feeling good. How does your mind feel? What's that texture like? And the cool thing is if I ask you to think of somebody who you love and who makes you feel cared for or that you really care for, like little Remy, a puppy dog or somebody too. It doesn't have to be a person. If you think of that and you can feel that love, you can actually feel it in your body. And so that's something that's really incredible, that you don't have to be physically with that person or be physically in that space or experiencing that experience if it's an experience you're thinking of. But you can embody that. Same thing goes for feeling grounded during uncertain times. If we're able to practice feeling connected, present, grounded, even when things are pretty calm and safe, we're able to tap back into that feeling of feeling calm, connected, grounded, when things do go topsy-turvy, if you will. And so by practicing different ways of feeling present, it helps us to feel that way even when the uncertainty or different things come. And so I really like to do that. I use different mantras and different things. And one of the ones I practiced during my pain recovery was I love my body, I love my cells. And I noticed that different times when I would get stressed, even when it wasn't about my body, my brain would go to that mantra because I knew it made me feel safe. And I thought it was so fascinating. And so it can be very useful to have something like that as kind of your anchor or something you can go to as well. And if you're practicing that even not during those times of chaoticness, is that a word? Then you'll be able to go to it in those moments as well. And so, what I also would love to tap into is like, when can we focus on adding in good things rather than focusing on what's going on around us? A lot of times when life throws us, sometimes that could be as simple as getting a cold. I know that happens a lot for folks, is they'll get some sniffles or allergies or something, and that will be enough to, even if they've been making really great progress in pain recovery, this doesn't happen for everyone. So just because I'm saying this, don't embody this if this doesn't happen for you. Sometimes I want to normalize it for those who have had this experience, because I have. If you have something like that come up and then you go and you notice the pain starts to flare again because there's something else happening, or you were going very, very smoothly, you were feeling like you were getting better, and then some stress happens at work, and then you have another thing come up in your body. And so what I want you to be aware of is just noticing when those things happen and meeting yourself with huge amounts of compassion and kindness, and also reassurance, because in those moments, it's just like, oh, there you are, body. There you are, sensations. I've seen you before. I know what you're up to. It's okay. This is a really hard time right now, but we're going to be okay, and we are going to get through this, and I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to be here with you together. We're on the same team. Those sorts of kind reassurances for the brain and the body can be really powerful and very simple as well. And it doesn't seem like it's going to make the biggest difference, but if you learn to talk to your body in a kind, gentle way, it will respond by kind of letting the albatross off the shoulders and relaxing into that present moment. And it can be really, really nice to do. So, and so there were a few questions that I wanted to get to today. Let me just pull those up here. Okay, so one of these questions is about how do you stay grounded when you get a migraine attack? I get chronic migraines. First of all, I'm so sorry that this happens to you. It happened to me too, and I know how tough it can be. And I also work with quite a few patients with chronic migraines. And so I want to offer that hope that things absolutely can change for you. But what I want to talk about is staying grounded during those chronic migraine attacks. And so, and this can be applied to other attacks or other flare-ups as well, but I'm going to specifically put the migraine lens on it. And so the first things I would do is, one, notice your language and how does the word attack make you feel in your body? Probably bracing or retreating, right? And so if we want to call them something else, it can be really powerful. And think of it as a different sort of analogy. I used to talk about the pain as in weather, because weather is changeable. So even if it was a cloudy, cold day in my body that day, I knew that perhaps the sun would come out again tomorrow. And I have a client who uses the analogy of stormy seas. is when that's how she describes her migraine attacks, which is really powerful because then you can use all sorts of other analogies along with the sea as well, and even imagine calm waters or blue skies or whatever it is for you. So just notice how you're talking about what's happening. It's not negating the fact that you are in a serious amount of pain and it's very difficult. It's just changing that so that our nervous system doesn't brace or retreat like it might with the word attack. Another thing that can be very helpful is to have a nice sort of visualization you give yourself in those moments of the attack. And so what we want to do is give yourself sort of like a nice, safe, calm place that you can go to. And I think I've talked about this maybe in another webinar as well. But imagining a safe spot or a nice place you can go to in your mind that helps you keep cozy and lets you also remind yourself that this too shall pass and that you've gotten through all of the other migraine attacks before today, and that you will be okay in the end as well. And then using some of those other tips that I mentioned at the beginning too. But reassurance is very, very helpful during those times as well. I'd also say doing things that fill you up and fill up your cup. That's a big one of staying grounded during this. Oftentimes when we have something going on in our lives, it's very easy to put those things to the back burner or even take them off the stove completely. I know I stopped dancing for a month or two, which is amazing that I can dance again because I used to not be able to walk 2 houses down the block. But when I finally got myself back into a dance class, I remembered, oh wow, this is why I do this. It's not at all for me physically, it's for myself mentally, and so that I can be the best version of me in those moments. And so what fills up your cup? What do you need? And like make a list of 3 things that you want to do daily, and they can be very small. It's like make a cup of tea, stretch, practice gratitude. They don't have to be big things, but you can also have big things on there too if they are for you. So stay grounded in that way by filling up your cup and making sure that you are taking care of you. All right, so next question is, what are the best ways to integrate pain reprocessing therapy on your daily preventative regimen when you are busy? Great question. I would stick with what feels good for you, what works for you. So in the LIN program, there's 12 different care kits that go over all these different wonderful aspects of different parts of pain reprocessing therapy, along with some other types of work that we incorporate in the LIN program as well. And so, for instance, if somatic tracking is your jam and you love somatic tracking, do a few seconds, do 30 seconds, do 5 minutes, maybe even 10, doesn't matter. Do a little bit of that every day or add it into part of your routine. I believe James Clear, who wrote a book about habits, there's something called habit stacking. And so I like to habit stack things. And what works for me is when I wake up in the morning, a lot of times I'll pop on a guided meditation or some sort of like non-sleep deep rest. If you're familiar with Andrew Huberman's protocol, it's like a yoga nidra. I'll do that in the morning to help regulate my nervous system before I even get out of bed. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to wake up and feel vital and want to get out of bed in the morning. And that helps me be able to do that. And so I would just tap into different parts of what feels good for you. Another thing would be offering that positive lens of whatever you're going through. When you're dealing with something difficult, imagine yourself in the future and what would you tell yourself? What good thing could come out of this if you were to look back on it? Oftentimes we can look back on different parts of our lives and be like, oh wow, I'm so glad that thing that I really, really wanted didn't happen because it would have blocked this other good thing coming in. So even if things are really crazy right now, what if you could back at it, hindsight is 2020, and what reassurance would you give yourself in that moment? So incorporating different aspects of pain reprocessing therapy. Another good one is outcome independence, something like I will be okay no matter what. And again, mentioning my mother, my wonderful mother, she has this phrase. She says, all will be well and all will be well and all manner of things will be well. And so that, again, it's not sugarcoating something. It's just reminding yourself like, okay, I do have this. It will be well. And I can't remember if it's from Shakespeare in Love or what. I'm quoting all sorts of things today, but it's, it will be okay in the end. What if it's not okay? Then it's not the end. So that's something that I also find very helpful. And so we've got a couple of questions in the chat here. I've heard that this can help with binocular dysfunction, but that is an objective finding. So I am not familiar with binocular dysfunction. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly. However, I'm happy to do some research. If you want to message us, let's say like support at Lynn.health probably would be good. Yes, Hunter's nodding. So go ahead and message us and we'll do some research and we'll let you know. But I personally am not familiar with that particular term. But yes, let us know and we'll get in touch with you. And Yalda says, is it better for the nervous system to engage in a calming exercise or practice or be physically active? Oh, I love this question. Or be physically active when seeking groundedness. I tend to go straight to guitar playing, but that's not exactly relaxing, but it takes my mind off the stress. Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I had a post-it note somewhere, but this goes along perfectly with it. How beautiful that you know your nervous system and you know yourself and you're giving yourself that stress relief, even though it doesn't look like calming, quote unquote. Our bodies and our nervous systems, they tend to go one way or the other. And sometimes you can go so high in that sympathetic state and then crash and go back to the parasympathetic. But then other times people are in more of the parasympathetic and need a little bit more activation. And so I find that when you have a little bit of chaos or anxiety or different things happening, doing something physically can be extremely, extremely helpful. You do not need to sit still. You do not need to calm your mind and change your thoughts. Oftentimes we can change the thoughts by changing the body. It's called a bottom-up approach. And so if playing the guitar works well for you, please keep doing that. It's wonderful. Maybe incorporate other movements that feel good and safe and reassuring. And then other times you can try and practice the soothing or the calming. But just because other people need nervous system soothing, it's more about nervous system balancing and that adaptability and flexibility. So knowing what you need is super important. And that post-it that I wrote, I think it said, what if what you need isn't wrong? What if what you need is exactly what you need? And so by giving yourself permission to do the way you experience life in that way, and giving yourself permission to feel like, hey, I'm okay, I can do this, it's really great. So we've come to the end of our time. And it was so nice to chat with you all. Thank you all so much for coming. If you are interested in chatting more with us about the Lynn program or about the coaching that we do here or any of the concepts that we talked about today, there is a link to the Calendly as well. And this is such an important, wonderful topic, and I could have gone on for another few hours about it. So I really appreciate you being here today. I hope you got what you needed, and give yourself a nice big hug and maybe a really big stretch and stomp your feet into the ground and just enjoy being in your body to the most that you can in this moment. It doesn't mean it needs to be perfect, but it is there for you, as are we. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all, and take care.